This is the new edition. Hello people, I'm D Scorpion, and today we're looking once again at Darklands with the new 2nd edition rulebook. It is not good. I am not joking when I say that this 2nd edition is just the 1st edition, just copied and pasted into a brand new book. The formatting is exactly the same. The text is exactly the same. The fluff text plus the rules combined. The repeat of Chapter 2 in Chapter 3. Even, the thickness is almost the same. And I'm just thinking, did they even really change anything? And I will also say now, for those who remember in the first video, the scan codes of that cool idea, they basically just never improved upon this here. All the scan codes outside of Bloodlust, I assume, still lead to the Rules Are Coming video. They never gave or put any more effort into this idea. And the worst part is now, if they do ever actually put those videos up, the scan codes, I believe, are still just going to lead to that one video. This is what the fuck? Other issues are, just in general that I still take from the book. The general still refers to, the model and the player. Numbers in stats still go to, the double digits, even though, they don't really mean anything unless you're, looking at, 40s versus 50s or whatnot. The rules I think Rob are trying to present in this game are to be crunchy, and I don't think that's a bad thing. We don't really have a whole lot of, super crunchy war games out in the market, to my knowledge, and at least here in, the States. But with that crunch, it doesn't feel like a potato chip. It feels like a jawbreaker with how they're always presented, because of, how often he needs to, explain stuff and just not necessarily have a way to just quickly get to the point. On top of that, this rule book, the more I look at it, is literally just rules, which, again, that's not entirely bad. Some games just always have rules, but those other games maybe just have, a sheet. There's, 4 or 5 pages. It's you can read everything in that. Warhammer, of course, also has, fluff in their rule books. From, the core book, their army books, all those various other books. It gives you something to read, and it actually kind of adds a little bit more value than just download the rules free online. There's a little bit more to those books than just pure rules. It gives you more insight into, the world to explore. But here, it feels like the exact same book that I just had to buy twice. I will say, however, there are some changes. There are some changes in 2nd edition that I have noticed. The fluff text has kind of been a little bit expanded for some of the factions. For example, we now have the Franks, which now the French are finally in the game. I do apologize for any French people who I thought were the evil Easons. Not really. You would now have new rules for chariots. Even though I don't think there are any chariot models in the game, which actually now, quick side rant on my previous take on the models. They're still well detailed, I still recommend them, but on a personal level, I do wish assembly of them was a bit cleaner and neater. When I was putting together my dragon men, a lot of the time I didn't really have a reference because you don't get instructions. And it just felt very infuriating to try and get pieces to stay together, but they wouldn't stick. So I had to really heavily use green stuff to make sure stuff stayed in place, especially for I think the bannermen with this very ornate symbol on the top of it with all these various different pieces I had to get together, and that just was a little frustrating. I also just had all these leftover bits that I didn't really know what they go to, even based on their store images. The Chthonies, when I was actually playing them in a test game, basically all their heads always kept falling off. And I don't know if that was just because they were metal and the joints weren't deep enough after the mold, or it's just that maybe it was just the weight, even with some of the weapons falling off. I don't know if it's the green stuff I used wasn't strong enough, or I don't know if it was the accelerator I used to help with super glue get hardened faster. When they just started falling apart and not staying together, and I was I now need to take the time to go back and assemble it. It's I just think in my mind how is this actually going to work when I'm painting them? Am I going to experience that same frustration? It does kind of put a damper on my view of them a bit. Which, funny enough, they're giant models. The Scylla that I got with my Chthonies worked together fine. A lot of the heads had these square brackets and sockets. They were lettered. They just went together just fine. I didn't really have too many pieces I had to fumble around with and be like, okay, which piece goes to what? And afterwards, it looks fantastic. I'm pretty sure it probably just has to do with the fact that it's a newer model, and I think if I recall last, they were going more in like 3D printing a bit, or like 3D modeling at the very least. So that could be a reason, and that's what I really like. So if they can continue making models like that, like almost no issue. I think that would be great. Now, where was I? Oh, yeah. Back to the rulebook. Kind of actually going back to the new factions a bit, I do kind of worry that as they kind of continue doing this, whether or not these factions are actually going to get more of a model range. Some of the models of these factions do exist, but they only really exist as, like, mercenaries. And I'm just kind of wondering, like the Saxons and the Franks, are we just going to get them as mercenaries, or are they going to get full-fledged factions, and what are, like, the monster units going to be associated them with are. This isn't necessarily a positive note, but there are no new scenarios in the book, so you're still kind of just left with just killing each other as your main scenario, because they're taking a full book of just scenarios and selling it separately. I do not like this. There are little bits of history added in. I think on like page 100, it actually explains the scenario of like this major battle, which I really liked and is like what I was kind of hoping before in my last video of like actually using the book to tell a bit more of history. There have been more actions and pages for other actions added onto the book. So like I think the attack action now has like 2 extra pages of detail to it. That's not what I want. Health and damage have been changed. So health is now like is very much a smaller flat amount. Like humans have like 3 to 4, monster infantry have like 8, maybe 10. And damage, which before I forgot to mention in the old edition, you actually rolled for. So you could potentially deal either like 0 damage or exploding like 9s and like continual damage, which kind of was fun, but now it's just a flat amount, which I think is a lot better considering the health changes. Gold is now silver for army roster. I'm guessing that's just kind of a lore reason. And on top of that, army building has heavily shifted to, I guess, kind of a 40k battalion system, which is a step in the right direction. I like it, but it's a little hard for me to read at the moment. It's just very messy that I don't really quite know what's going on. The index now fully works. Hooray, thank God. Various traits and abilities now have been reworked, and that's kind of about it. That's all. Like, those are the major changes I really could have, stood out to me the most. And like I kind of mentioned before, I did actually get some games in. So for those who previously were judging me of like, in my last review of like, how can you judge this game without playing it? I finally did. I played one match with the quick rules with a friend, and another match I played by myself with my Chthonies and Berthoniad. It was very interesting. It was kind of hard to do because none of the starter sets that I got ever came with like the actual like tokens that you need for like orders and whatnot, so I just kind of had to like wing a lot of stuff. And I think by the end of the 5th round, I just decided like whichever general kills each other first wins. And I think with like a really good initiative roll, the Chthonies went first and just completely killed the dragon general, and I called it game there. Schrodinger's opponent. Did I win or did I lose against myself? But, yeah, I don't really have a whole lot else to say about the book itself. And that's kind of the sad thing, because I really just was wondering whether or not I needed to make another video on this, because it's basically just the same book, just with, like, small tweaks and changes here to the actual rules, which I don't really think warrants a second edition. And I also kind of knew like my previous video probably wasn't going to affect the 2nd edition at all, but I was expecting something more than this. I was really hoping for like more of a cut down on words, because I feel like over explaining something is just as bad as under explaining something. You know, I was expecting the scan codes to maybe work, and maybe even a bit more of the history lesson of like who Penda is in this setting, but I never really got that. So I do kind of feel like the game is going in the right direction a little bit, but with how it is right now, I'm not really satisfied with the rulebook. There are things I like about it, but overall, it still just feels like a repeat and something they could have just errated and just kind of slowly changed. This isn't really worthy of a 2nd edition, and I kind of feel like that is a massive shame. But do I still support it after now actually having played a match? Kinda. I think it has potential. It's going in the right direction. I just think it really needs a lot more work. But yeah, that's basically all I have to say. Not too much. I guess I just need to work on other projects. Going to be probably talking about D&D maybe in my next video. I got some like other war games I've been looking into to talk about. So yeah, that's it. I will see you guys next time, I guess.